Shalom, shalom. This is Following Yahshua. Welcome again to the Rock. Although today we're inside because it's cold and it's rainy. I don't want to be out there. It's scary. Not really, but it is cold and rainy. And early in the morning, just got back from work. As you can see, I'm dirty, so don't take that into consideration. I am dirty. Had to buy about 500 pounds of feed. Chicken feed for our animal. We buy our feed in bulk. For those who don't know, we buy it in bulk. We buy a ton of it at a time, so that we don't have to keep going out and buying it. Sure, it's expensive, but it's also wiser, saves you trips, especially when you live, way out here. But anyway, this video has nothing to do with that. This video has to do with another reason you want to come out of her, Yah's people. Another reason why you want to be ye separate. Another reason specifically you want to stay out of those metropolitan and areas and city areas. I want to read an article to you. For those who don't know about the coronavirus, it's a virus that it's sweeping through China as we speak right now. The last I checked, there are about 18 or 19 dead. It's in many countries now. It's in Hong Kong, it's in Japan, it's even here in the United States of America. They had a confirmed case in Washington State. It's in Mexico, unconfirmed case. It's in Australia. It's spreading. They don't know how to stop it. It's mutating at a rate that they can't keep up with. And they're saying that it could be one of those. It could. I'm not fear mongering, but it could be one of those viruses that takes out about 1 to 2% of people, which is kind of amazing because you think of 1 or 2%. What 1% of a million is what 10,000. 2% of a million is 2,000. So 1% of 10 million would be 100,000. So you multiply that on 1% of 100 million would be 1 million. Starting to see this? We have about 300 million people in this country, America. That'd be 3 million people. But here's the reason why you want to stay out of those metropolitan areas, because they're saying this virus is bad. I'm reading from the Washington Post. Wuhan quarantine expands as Chinese fear authorities withholding information about the coronavirus outbreak. Beijing. This is written at 5:48 Central Standard Time. The central Chinese city of Wuhan pulsated with fear and anger Thursday as 11 million people awoke to news that they are being confined to a metropolis-sized quarantine zone designed to contain a widening coronavirus outbreak. I never thought about that. One of the reasons you don't want to be in these cities is because if there ever is an epidemic, if there ever is something like this, as we see, they're quarantining the whole damn city. 11 million people are at least they're attempting to quarantine 11 million people of the city of Wuhan. Quarantining them. They're cutting off public transportation and are shutting down roads and keeping the people. Now that sucks. Let's say you don't have the virus, but now you are quarantined amongst those that do have the virus. What kind of spread is going to take place within the city of Wuhan? The fact that they are widening the quarantine zone is saying something. The fact that they are broadening the quarantine zone is saying something. Because first it was just Wuhan. Now it's getting bigger. Let's continue. The quarantine is also spreading with nearby, I'm going to butcher this, Huanggang and Inzu announcing they are shutting down travel networks, effectively confining some 20 million people to their municipalities. In Wuhan, train and bus stations were abruptly closed. Hundreds of flights were canceled, and some roads were blocked to stop people from leaving the city Thursday, a day when transportation networks should have been heaving with passengers heading to their hometowns for the official start of the Lunar New Year holiday on Friday night. So the Chinese Lunar New Year is starting. So you've got tons of travel taking place, and they're taking this sickness with them. And here's the sad thing. This sickness has a 2-week incubation period, which means a person can be carrying the virus for 2 weeks, effectively spreading the virus for 2 weeks before they ever show signs that they have it. Which means, how do you effectively quarantine something? How do you track what people you've bumped into? Sneezed in a bus, sneezed in a cab. I mean, how many of you have seen the movie Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman? When they're in the movie theater and the guy sneezes and it tracks one of those particles as it floats around the movie theater and lands in somebody's mouth. And we saw how that movie went for those who have seen the movie Outbreak. How do you effectively quarantine 11 million people? How do you effectively quarantine 20 million? And why is what they call the hot zone, why is it spreading? You have to take that into consideration why you may not want to be in those metropolitan areas. Let's say this thing hits New York, and you know the authorities know more than you do. So before they tell you what's going to happen, they will have effectively already had a quarantine plan in place before you are able to leave that city. This is why, Yah says, come out of her, my people. One of the reasons is that you do not be a partaker of her plagues, of her sins. So it's a spiritual, you don't want to partake in her sins, and it's a physical and natural, you don't want to partake in her plagues. Because when these plagues come down on these areas, you don't want to be there. The worst thing that you could be, worst situation you could find yourself in a viral outbreak is around other people. That is one of the worst things you would want to be around. You don't want to be in population centers or areas where there's a high population density. You don't want to be on a bus. You don't want to be in a plane. You don't want to be where there's a grocery store where there's a lot of people concentrated in a small area. Local education, you don't want your children going to school. That's why there's an advantage. Outside of the normal raising your own children and taking responsibility, you just excuse the children are working in the background. They're building. Don't worry about that. You'll also take in consideration your children being around people, around other children that can get them sick. Local education officials wearing masks announced on TV that the start of the spring semester at all Hubei province schools would be delayed because of the outbreak. Schools are closed. A bigger outbreak is certain, said Guan Yi, a virologist who helped identify severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, in 2003. He estimated conservatively. He said that this outbreak could be 10 times bigger than the SARS epidemic because that virus was transmitted by only a few super spreaders in a more defined part of the country. We have passed through the golden period for prevention and control, he told Keepn magazine, from self-imposed quarantine after visiting Wuhan. What's more, we've got the holiday traffic rush and a dereliction of duty from certain officials. Authorities initially said that the virus, which began in the Wuhan food market selling exotic animals for consumption, this is why you want to make sure that you are growing your own food and you're eating the animals that Yah prescribed for you to eat in Leviticus 11. You want to make sure you are producing your own food and eating those things prescribed by Yah, because Yah did not prescribe us as commandment keepers, as law keepers, as Israelites, as believers, as those that are truly following the law that he prescribed for us. He didn't prescribe for us to eat exotic animals. He gave us a list of what we are to eat. And that list of the animals that Yah prescribed never was done away with. And it's not Mosaic law, because you read Genesis chapter 7, like we talked about in our live stream, Yah had 7 pairs of clean animals go on in the ark and 2 of unclean animals. So that predates Moses' law. the clean and unclean animals. And not everything is considered a food because Yah never considered exotic or unclean animals food. He never said unclean animals are food. He only said clean animals are food. Let's continue. So which began the Wuhan food market selling exotic animals for consumption was mild and could not be transmitted between humans. So first they're saying it can't be transmitted through humans. Oops. That happens to be a very big oops. But that changed this week when the numbers of people infected by the virus, which has an incubation period as long as 14 days, began to rise. 14 days. Can you even remember the people that you bumped into in the last 14 days? The amount of people that you ran into in the last 14 days? Probably not. Especially if you live in that city. Now cases have been detected around the country, from Harbin to the north of Shenzhen in the south. The Chinese territories of Hong Kong and Macau have both reported cases, as have countries including the United States, Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. And Australia's in that mix, and an unconfirmed case is in Mexico and some of the Arabic countries that had it. Now, mind you, these countries that are third world, that don't have the best sanitary methods, what happens when it hits one of those areas? It explodes. It explodes. So you can go on and read the rest of the article. I'll post a link to the article in the description. But these are the things I want everybody to consider. When Yah told us to come out, he was trying to preserve us from receiving some of these things, from being around some of these things. If you're in a metropolitan area and they lock that city down and you're in the midst of that city, when they lock it down, you're not going anywhere. They don't care what your story is. They don't care if your family is outside the quarantine zone. They don't care. And I do watch certain types of movies where I can learn things from. I don't watch movies for entertainment. I only watch certain movies I can learn from. If you watch any of these movies, any of these quarantine movies, any of these epidemic movies, pandemic movies, even the movie Quarantine itself, understand, or is it the REC, the record, which is where Quarantine got the storyline from. When they lock an area down, whatever's inside that area, whatever happens, happens. They do the best they can. But the most important thing, what they're operating on, is they don't want it to spread. So whatever happens in the quarantine area is what happens in the quarantine area. Whatever happened, they don't want it to spread outside the quarantine area. And working in the medical industry, I had to and have to take hazmat classes. You do not want to be in a quarantine area. You do not want to be in a quarantined hospital. You don't want to be in quarantine. You definitely don't want to be in a quarantined city of 11 million people. Think of them quarantining New York City, Los Angeles, California. And I think it's almost impossible to quarantine that many people. But just think of what chaos would happen within the quarantine zone. These are the things that we have to take in consideration. Yah's ways are better. And this is why he has done everything he can to give us information to save us spiritually and physically. He has given us deliverance, spiritual deliverance, overcoming. And then he's given us the means to deliver ourselves physically. It comes down to this. Are we going to do it? Now again, this thing may fizzle out and be nothing, but it doesn't look that way when the Chinese government is expanding their quarantine zones. What if this thing is bigger than they're giving off? What if they're hiding the real numbers? Just what if? Again, I'm going to post that article in the description. I hope that this provokes somebody, again, to say, wow, I need to make these moves spiritually, and I need to make these moves physically, because I really don't know if I'm in a major metropolitan area. I really don't know if tomorrow could be the day they say, oh my gosh, we're quarantined. oh my gosh, there's something taking place in your area, in your neck of the city. Things to think about. All right, bless you. I hope you all have a blessed day. Please do your research on this virus. Please be aware. Please take the precautions needed to take care of yourself, your family, your children, because this thing does not look like it's a joke. Bless you all. Shalom.